Hello and welcome to your award-winning The Reasons I'm Broke podcast, bringing you the reasons we're broke every single week through news and headlines ranging from comics, movies, TV, video games, and more. I'm Daniel, and your other host this week is Sam. Welcome back, Sam.
Hey, it's good to be back. Thank you for having me again. I'm excited to talk about some hot goss or some tea, as the kids say.
Yes, the tea. It's fire this week. If this is your very first episode of the show, the way we format it is we go through this week's news, and then we end up with the Brocat Block, which is the more personal side of the show, what Sam and I have been up to since you last heard us. So let's jump right in and explore sector number 580. So coming off of the success of the Super Mario Bros. Animated movie, the 1993 live-action Mario movie, in spite of its initial critical and commercial challenges, is getting a second chance with a 4K restoration, releasing in Japanese theaters on its 30th anniversary. While there aren't currently similar plans for North America, the success of Illumination Super Mario Bros. Movie could potentially generate interest in bringing the original film back to theaters. I remember it was at the top of the charts on Apple TV when the Mario Brothers movie came out in theaters. People started renting this 1993 one. But I thought in Japan, this was like sacrilege. I know famously Miyamoto did not like that movie.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think this is something I've noticed a lot recently is when a new project for like a beloved franchise comes out, people, maybe it's just like a morbid interest or something, but people like to go back and watch even bad iterations of it that were previously released. Maybe it's to do like a side-by-side comparison, or maybe it's just kind of like, you go on these deep dives and you're like, I just want all of the content of this franchise. I've been doing that with something recently that we'll talk about at Brocat Block, but I do think there's probably, I haven't watched this movie in, I would guess 15 years. There's probably some of that it's so bad it's funny aspect to it. I remember watching it as a kid with my older brother, and we just thought it was absolute insanity. And I mean, this is back when we had an SNES and we're playing Dr. Mario, and we're just like, this isn't anything like the games, but I'm sure there's some type of entertainment here to be had for sure.
I remember loving it as a kid because this was that era where, and people saw it with the Marvel movies, the kind of older ones, where it's like just any reference to a video game or a comic book character, no matter how far off the mark it is. As kids, at least I would appreciate it. I'd be like, oh, this is awesome. It's represented in something. Even if it's terrible, I like it. I used to like this movie when I was a kid. It was one of the movies, I first saw it in Mexico City when we visited my relatives when I was real young. And I remember really liking it. I haven't seen it since then. I've seen all the criticism to it. But another example would be like that Mortal Kombat movie. Although it's not a good example because I actually think that's a legitimately good movie with all the martial arts and the special effects for the time and the acting by Shang Tsung. But, even back then I was like, I don't care if there aren't bloody fatalities in this movie. I still love this movie just because it's my thing on the big screen.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, like, it's so funny too, because this era is kind of what led to the whole discussion of, can there be good video game adaptations? But like, people turned up to see these movies back then. Cause like you said, any representation, because back then, games were a more niche interest. It wasn't like the way they are now. And I know for younger listeners, it's probably hard to imagine, but like, there was a good majority of us that were getting picked on for playing certain types of games. So it like any kind of vindication was welcome. I mean, some of us watched the Blood Rain movies just because we're like, holy shit, they're making it. And I mean, the Resident Evil movies, yes. My friends would show up for every single one of them.
Yeah, that's the nice thing where someone like Leo won't have that misconception of all anime adaptations are bad, all video game adaptations are bad. Now there's like so many good examples. He's seen the Mario Brothers movie, he's into the Sonic movies. the superhero movies. He's got all these. Right now, Batman Beyond is his thing. He's like, I like Batman Beyond more than regular Batman, and I'm like, where did I go wrong? What have I done?
I mean, at least he's not completely, off the mark. At least he's not saying something like, I think George Clooney's the best Batman.
James Gunn's the one saying that.
Oh God.
Well, I am curious as well, just like Japan is. And honestly, if this does get a 4K restoration, then so be it. Is it the movie that deserves it? Probably not. There's probably a ton more movies that deserve the 4K restoration, but you know what? I bet you people are going to turn up for it. And we have more from Sega this time. More video game news as Sega team boss Takashi Iizuka shared that pixel art, as seen in Sonic Mania, won't be sustainable in the future. He explained that evolving art styles are necessary for ongoing content creation. This was in an interview with Games Radar. And he highlighted the significance of both 2D and 3D Sonic games, with Sonic Superstars representing the next step for 2D Sonic, and the open zone concept from Sonic Frontiers guiding 3D titles. And I posted this in a couple of Sonic groups, and it definitely riled up the Sonic fan base because they're like, the company that made Sonic Mania is willing to bring out pixelated Sonic games. But for whatever reason, Sonic team, Sega, did not rehire the company and instead are doing Sonic Superstars on their own in-house without the infamous pixel graphics. And it's kind of a shame because I do think that kids could find the appeal in pixel art as well, not just people our age.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, like a lot of my younger coworkers are really into this like 16-bit pixel like throwback genre that's kind of like had a resurgence recently. I'm a fan of it too in the right medium, and I definitely think Sonic is the right medium. It's the versions that you and I are probably most familiar with. I've played some of the 3D games also. I remember playing a shit ton of I think it was Sonic Team Racing or one of those games when I was a kid, and Sonic Adventures. But I mean, for me, that is like the definitive version of Sonic because I first played it on a Sega Saturn. So like, this is what Sonic is to me. And I do think we are now kind of in the heyday of pixel games seeing a massive resurgence. I mean, games like Octopath Traveler and Chained Echoes, there's like a resurgence in interest in old Final Fantasy and just these like multitude of Japanese pixel games. So it's definitely a disappointment. I guess I understand to some degree what he's saying with this statement of like, I think what he's saying is he's seeing this as a passing phase, but I don't know if that's entirely true as far as the sustainability goes. I think there's always going to be an interest in it. How big that interest is might vary, but I mean, you could say that about any video games in general. I mean, like we were just saying, video games did not used to be as big as they are now. So it's hard to imagine people entirely growing out of wanting to see this version of Sonic.
At the very least, at least they are making quote unquote 2D Sonic games where it's just left, right, up, and down alongside the 3D worlds, because I do think that, and I talked about this with Treasure Hunting Sonic, on how the Sonic fan base is going to play both. Like they'll just play whatever Sonic game is available. And by making the 2D Sonic games, you may attract some of the older gamers that maybe aren't playing games like Sonic Frontiers, but are like, oh, I like the 2D Sonic games. I'll come back for just those. And so people like me are more willing. I'm going to get Sonic Superstars, but I didn't get Frontiers. So I'm that perfect guy of like, you're going to get an extra $1 out of guys like me if you just produce Sonic in 2D gameplay. As good or bad as they are, even if they're known for re-releasing these old games. It's like, just keep re-releasing them, release the Sonic Advance series, keep making money off of the same thing, and I won't complain. I mean, it sucks that the pixel art isn't going to be one of their priorities moving forward, but at least for now, I'm keep making the 2D Sonic games in whatever form they want.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, I think a good chunk of their fan base is people our age that like, that's more appealing to them. So it'll be interesting in the next few years to see how that decision shakes out. Or you and I both know they very well could double back on that and say, well, because of the fan interest, we've actually decided to do this in conjunction with the 3D and other 2D games we're putting out. So we'll see what happens.
As if we didn't need another reason to value Xbox's Game Pass, we're now getting the competition kind of shooting themselves in the foot a little bit here, as Sony is quietly raising PlayStation Plus subscription prices starting now, September, as of this month. So the lowest tier annual cost will go from $60 to $80, and the top tier PlayStation Plus premium subscription will surge from $120 to $160. Sony claims that this is to ensure quality games and benefits, but this affects both current and future subscribers. The one significant savings of a year of PlayStation Plus Premium will now only be $56 off the full price. So this is something that it's like a $20 fucking hike, man. Like, I don't know. I would rather take that money. I mean, what's the cheapest? $80? I mean, Game Pass is less than $20 right now, and you get more value out of it. I really don't think this is a good move for Sony, and it's going to hurt gamers.
This is a pretty terrible move for Sony. I mean, I literally do 50% of my gaming on PlayStation, so this has me like reconsidering some stuff. And I literally was having a conversation with this about this with some coworkers earlier today. Before I even looked at the show notes, it just came up because somebody read the article about the price hike, and I think that the fact that there's no kind of grandfather clause or anything is really going to piss people off, because some of us have had our PSN memberships since PS3 was around, and it's like we've watched them gradually hike this up, but not to this extent at any one time. And literally, I had a coworker that was talking about, well, the only thing I didn't like about Game Pass was there was so much on there that I never ended up finishing. And it's like, dude, if that's your fucking complaint about the service, that's glorious. Like, if your complaint is there's so much content, I don't know where to start for the money I'm getting, that's insane. Like, that's just infinite value. Whereas this, like, I try and squeeze every bit of value I can out of PSN, and it's like, some months there's something awesome on there, right? That I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I've been wanting to play this anyway, and I didn't want to pay the price. Some months I'm literally just on there getting something randomly because it's like, well, it's part of the service, I might as well get it. And I never end up playing it because it's not anything appealing. They're already kind of having a rough go at it as to what they're making available for what you're paying. So this is a pretty bad look by Sony, but it's their money to lose, I guess. So whatever.
I haven't re-upped PlayStation Plus in years. Obviously, my gaming time has gone down. I actually had, I don't know if I ever told you the story. I had 7 years of PlayStation Plus prepaid because Target, like I was working at GameStop at the time, and my manager comes in and he's like, "Did you see the Target ad?" And I'm like, "No, what about it?" And he was like, "Look, they accidentally switched the picture of the 3-month PlayStation Plus with the 1 year, but they left the price the same. So I think it was like $25 for the 3-month." And I was like, "Holy shit!" So instead of the $60 or $50 for the year, you can get it for $25. He's like, "Yeah, I just got 2 cards. I just showed him the ad, and they honored it." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." So Kelly and I went over there, and we did the same thing and got 7 years worth. And I would have gotten more, but like
that's genius.
I would have gotten more, but money was tight even. But I was like, I don't have to worry about PlayStation Plus forever again. Like, to me, 7 years was a long time. And it was like I redeemed them back to back, and I made sure to do just 2 because I'm like, okay, I hope the years stack. I hope they don't just double up. Okay, cool, they stack. And it said like till 20, I forgot what the year was, but I'm like, oh man, this is amazing. But once that ran out, I'm like, yeah, that's it. I'm done. Especially when I got it at such a deal. I'm like, it seems like I'm getting ripped off by paying full price now.
Oh, for sure. And what PS Plus has included has changed drastically since it was first introduced. It used to be like, you got a good amount of free games, and you got like trial periods on demos before other people. And originally you could go online with just a PSN account. You didn't have to have PS Plus. It was like an add-on benefit if you got it. Now you need it just to go online, which anymore is a requirement for a lot of games. It's not just like if you want to get into a lobby for a competitive game. And now there's like additional tiers of it. It's like, oh, you want to play, like AAA titles on release day at a discount. You've got to get like PlayStation Now or whatever it is. Like you have to get the upper tiers. So it's like it's just getting more and more money hungry.
And that's the ironic thing about it, because during the whole trial between Microsoft and the Blizzard Activision acquisition, they kept arguing that this merger was not consumer friendly, whereas Microsoft and all the other companies, including Nintendo, that are like, we have no problem with this deal because they're signing over these games to be available on our consoles, sometimes for the first time in years, like in the Nintendo Call of Duty case. And so they're like, we're actually making more games available for more people by putting this deal through. And Sony's like, no, this is anti-consumer. Meanwhile, they're raising prices on PlayStation Plus. They're raising prices on PS5s overseas. So it just kind of goes to show you how it's all smoke and mirrors when it comes to this whole consumer-friendly shit.
Which, yeah, let's talk about PS5 for a minute. I still don't have one. They're now entering the phase where, like, a lot of games are going to be PS5 only. The PS4 is just starting to get phased out. There's still a distribution issue with those. They're still not readily available to a lot of people. And the price continues to go up. So I'm not sure like what their marketing ploy is with this. It's really odd. Like I was super hyped. I saw that the Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 trailer dropped. I watch it, and then at the end, it says PS5 exclusive of PC, like on PC eventually. And it's like, well, that's bullshit because Part 1 was on PS4. So if you got Part 1 on PS4, now you have to get a PS5 if you want to play Part 2.
That's how they got you.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's just full gotcha consumerism. It is the most underhanded shit they're doing. And it's the same thing with PlayStation Plus. It's like, well, we know you have to have this if you want to play our games, so just go ahead and fork it over.
Well, the good news is with obviously you have a PC and you've had one before. With the performance of that last Final Fantasy, I don't know what is the last one, 14 or 16 or
16.
something? 16 underperformed. That actually dropped the stock for Square Enix quite a bit after it underperformed and undersold, to the point where that same week they made some kind of deal behind closed doors or whatever. They didn't reveal what it was, but they made a deal with Microsoft. So that's good news for PC gamers. It's good news for Xbox gamers. Square Enix obviously is going, well, this ain't the path to go with if we're going to make it Sony exclusive or a timed exclusive. So the good news is if you're a PC gamer, you'll probably start seeing more of these games available quicker rather than on PS5 first. And for me, I'm going to get an Xbox Series X this fall or this winter, whatever the Black Friday better deal is, and get my Game Pass, and I'll finally jump into some Final Fantasy after some years, because a lot of those games will be available hopefully by then.
Hell yeah.
And here we have some Disney news, as Disney's current CEO, Bob Iger, and former CEO, Bob Chapek, and other executives are being sued by an investor for alleged misleading statements and deceptive accounting related to streaming losses concerning Disney+. So the lawsuit claims violations of the Exchange Act and breaches of fiduciary duties. Chapek has previously faced legal issues over alleged misleading statements regarding Disney+. So the lawsuit in the case, it says, quote, to conceal these adverse facts, defendants engaged in a fraudulent scheme designed to hide the extent of the Disney Plus losses and to make the growth trajectory of Disney Plus subscribers appear sustainable and 2024 Disney Plus targets appear achievable when they were not, end quote. Warner Brothers Discovery did the same thing. Netflix, to an extent, did the same thing as well. But for Disney Plus, when you're dealing with investors who are like, am I going to pull my millions of dollars? Oh, the reports, these numbers are adding up. It seems like my money's going to be safe. Lo and behold, they're actually losing millions of subscribers. Yeah, I'd be a pissed off investor because I would have sold back then rather than months later when Disney stock is plummeting further.
Yeah, I mean, Disney's business acumen in the last year or so has just been very questionable. For a while, it seemed like Disney Plus, could not lose, and they sure did find a way to lose. And I feel like every other week we're hearing about a lawsuit involving either Disney as a company or one of the, corporate upper echelons being involved in some kind of bad deal. So, for a company that prides itself on family friendliness, it's kind of shocking how rough of a go they've had with getting it right for their consumer and fan base. So it'll be interesting to see if this does anything to Disney's image as a whole. But it's definitely a bad look for, the business savvy Disney fan for sure. And, if you're a shareholder or a stockholder, it's definitely got to give you some misgivings about whether you want to invest further, because apparently now is not the time to go in on it.
No, and while it is low Disney stock compared to how it was 5 years ago or pre-COVID, I don't have any confidence in Disney myself. Like, I wouldn't, if I believed in the brand and I were a fan of Disney, I would still hesitate on investing in it. Maybe the only thing would be if the Apple buyout happens, when it happens, I should say, what kind of stock exchange would there be? Would I get Apple stock as well as, or the equivalent of Disney stock in Apple? Some kind of spin-off deal like it happened with AT&T and Warner Brothers Discovery. But other than that, I would not put any money into Disney Plus. This is not financial advice, just putting that out there, but just talking for myself. And instead, I'd go with a company that is looking brighter, someone that is sustainable, someone that's not making the wrong moves. We're seeing in media some flops with Disney, and it's like, yeah, this is not the trajectory we want to be on, and I don't believe in the company, to be honest with you, pulling it forward in 5 years. I think it's just going to get worse. The writer's strike has definitely lengthened that for a lot of these companies, especially the ones that say stupid shit like, well, we'll just wait it out until they all become homeless, crazy shit like that. So it seems like the executives, the people in charge, they're nastier than ever. And it's to the point where consumers can see it.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you brought up a good point there with the writer's strike going around. Disney actually probably has worse odds than I thought originally of turning this around anytime soon, because that is a company that is, entirely dependent on having an ace team of writers behind it. You cannot pull in a B team for a Disney movie. We've seen what happens with Disney movies in the past when the writing is not up to par. So, I once, like you said, certainly not one to give financial advice, but I don't see the stock going up anytime soon based on the hand that they're currently at the table with.
Well, the streaming service that does remain king, even though it looked a little dicey there during the Russian invasion thing when their subscribers dropped, they very quickly bounced right back, and that is Netflix. They just debuted the One Piece live action show, which I've yet to see. I have it on my list. I will check it out, even though I wouldn't call myself a One Piece fan, which might even be a good thing for me to check this out. But their big hit this winter, going into spring, I think January counts as spring, maybe it doesn't, but that is Rebel Moon, and they just released a teaser trailer for both parts 1 and 2.
Who among you is willing to die for what you believe?
So part 1 is called A Child of Fire, releases December 22nd. Part 2 is The Scargiver, and that would be a spring one, with April 19th as the release. Zack and crew did film Rebel Moon parts 1 and 2 back to back, so they are complete as far as filming is concerned. Now it's a matter of color grading, editing, post-production, and of course marketing. Someone on one of our brokettes on Facebook, Michael S., of the Rebel Moon trailer said, quote, "I think Rebel Moon is more comparable to the Riddick movies than to Star Wars. Even to an extent, Battlestar Galactica. but I do agree that Rebel Moon is what Star Wars would like to be, end quote. So I know you haven't checked out the trailer yet, Sam, but do you know a little bit of the history behind how this movie was almost made under Lucasfilm?
Yeah, I read an article about it yesterday because I think Zack has already let certain reviewers pre-screen it. And someone got to see it and they were talking about, you can definitely tell the imprint of originally this having been pitched as something Zack wanted Lucasfilm to produce as a Star Wars spinoff, but he's kind of definitely gone and done his own thing now that it's not tied to Star Wars. He doesn't have those restrictions as far as, Star Wars, it can push certain boundaries, but, at the end of the day, it's always been kind of a family event. So Zack can be a little more brutal and visceral with it. And you would know this better than me, Daniel, but in the article, I think they talked about he was going to do a more digestible, like a PG-13 version, and then also a director's cut that's a little bit longer that goes into more depth with some of the characters at either the same time or at a later date. And if that's the case, that'll be really interesting.
It will debut as a PG-13 release, and then at a later time, there's going to be a Snyder cut of it, rated R, and it's going to be at least an hour longer from part one, at least that we know. I don't know about part two. I don't know if he said it yet. But yeah, that's kind of the neat thing about it, is you can get the R-rated cut if you'd like, or you can get the PG-13 one, which is more like what a Star Wars fan would enjoy.
So I am super excited to watch it. I mean, I am not what meets the standard of a Star Wars fan by today's standard, but, in 1998, I was at the Phantom Menace day one with my dad, and we owned the original trilogy on VHS tape that I had watched it so many times the tape had worn down.
Nice.
Which only our older listeners will know the pain of that. But yeah. It was pretty glorious. So I'm pretty hype about this. Another thing I'm interested in is obviously, Netflix had the foresight to get in on this with Zack, which is, probably a good move on their part. I'm interested to see if this performs as well as most people think it is. Do you think part 2 might get a theatrical release as well and they might do like a double screening with part 1, or do you think they're going to keep it streaming only going forward?
If they were smart, they would do a limited release for part 1 sometime between its release on Netflix and in April. And then they would double up and offer a dual release, like a double feature by the time April rolls around. And that way they can double their money. Like, oh, I saw part 1 and I can see them back to back, and then offer just part 2 if you want. So you can do limited screenings of each. I don't know if they will, but the way Zack is editing it, he's doing it on a big screen as if he were to showcase it in a movie theater. So hopefully that's a good sign. And if they do have it in a limited release, because they did do it with Army of the Dead, hopefully that the Snyder fans go out for it and they go and see it. And honestly, this seems like a more general audience friendly movie than Army of the Dead was. So I fully expect it to be a more successful, which Army of the Dead was successful. It hit top 10. It broke some records on their streaming for certain categories. So I fully expect Rebel Moon to be a much bigger hit for him.
Yeah, I'm very excited to watch it, and I'm sure we'll do a pod after it premieres so that we can let the viewers know our thoughts on it.
I will break down the trailer a little bit, and none of this is spoilers necessarily. And I have heard some things about the movie as far as the origins of what it was, what it became, and what it is now, even with the quote-unquote lightsabers that are in the film. And originally, I don't know if you went even further back into the film's initial production, but it was originally a fully original concept, and he worked it, and eventually they're like, okay, what if we work it into a Star Wars film and try to get Lucasfilm to do it? And apparently Lucasfilm they liked it, but they wanted to add more Easter eggs and cameos from the Star Wars universe in the movie. And Zack didn't want that. He was resistant to just throwing in fan service, I guess is what it would be called. And so after Disney bought out Lucasfilm, they completely wiped out any projects that were in production, and they wanted to do their own thing, as big companies usually do. So then it became Zack's again, and he went back to what it originally was before they worked it into a Star Wars thing. And it's back to that Seven Samurai inspired concept. So a lot of people, especially the ones that you're talking about who were screened this movie ahead of time or that went on set to talk with Zack and Debbie about it, they were saying that it's less a Star Wars film and it's more like a Warhammer or a Dungeons and Dragons or Kurosawa, basically any film that's inspired by Zack, like Excalibur even, that all of those concepts are worked into this movie. Heavy Metal, they're saying it's a lot like that Heavy Metal movie. I don't know if you remember that one.
Yeah, I definitely do.
So that one's supposedly a heavy inspiration for it too.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. The reviewer that I read about actually did, in fact, compare it to a Kurosawa film, but with Zack's interpretation of lightsabers. So that's pretty spot on with everything I've read so far. And that has me super excited because for whatever reason, I was never really into Westerns as a kid, but I do love a samurai film. And, like I said, I grew up with Star Wars, and it's not a secret to most people that like Darth Vader's design is based off of samurai armor, and there's a lot of inspiration there. So I think Zack will probably knock it out of the park when it comes to translating that onto, a more realized version of what that could have been.
Well, I'm excited for you to see the trailer eventually, because one trailer breakdown I was watching, they were like, oh, this is a shot from anime. This looks like it's straight out of Cowboy Bebop. And this looks like, and me as someone who very casually watches anime, I'm like, is it? It just looks like a beautiful shot to me. But I'd be curious to see if you see any anime influences in the trailer itself. I know for the designs of the ships, they went with Transformers and Gundam. Transformers and Gundam for the designs of the ships. And that was the inspiration for it. Whereas, modern sci-fi is like, we need to make sleek ship designs. And they went, no, let's go back to anime of the 80s and sci-fi of the 80s and look at the ships then, where they were more rounded and bulky. And they used that as inspiration and then worked it into, well, an X-Wing is recognizable for its shape. So is the Death Star. So is the Millennium Falcon. So let's simplify these ship designs a little bit more so that you're able to draw them. So you can recognize, oh, that's that ship from Rebel Moon, whatever they end up calling it. That's something that on my rewatch, I'm like, yeah, that's fucking true. I didn't even pick up on the fact that these ships look like they are from the 80s. It's kind of bizarre how it works in today's live action.
I mean, as someone that's a huge fan of that era in mecha anime, that makes me super excited. And I mean, we've all been kind of joking about it in the Discord, but it's not surprising either because Zack is an anime fan. So it would make sense that he would want to pay homage to something that he draws inspiration from and that makes him excited. So that's really cool.
Another thing people have been pointing out is they're like, this movie cost, I don't want to say it was like $60 million to make. And it's like, how is the CG here better than the Flashes that's at over $250 million budget? It's just incredible how they're able to pull this stuff off. One of the interviewers that went on set asked Zack, like, how do you not have color clipping on your laser swords, just like the Disney Plus shows do? They have all this color clipping when they film their things where you can tell that the color is clashing from when they held whatever glowing prop is in their hands to when they did the CG. And Zack's like, honestly, we just lowered the lighting and then we were very careful when we were doing editing. And it's like, how is it that a lower budget can pull off better visuals than these massive companies? And I think the answer is what you and I have even been discussing in previous episodes of timing. These people are getting rushed on the special effects, and clearly Netflix has let Zack and his team take their time on this, and it pays off.
Well, and I think Zack is also a very careful director and meticulous, and I think the more these companies have this built-in fan base, the less they're going to try, Disney knows that people are going to watch these Star Wars shows no matter how bad the quality is or how bad they look. Whereas Zack is known for making every movie like something that he would want to show his kids or his friends with a lot of pride. So I think it's just a different point of perspective and different level of priority.
One of the other things that I also wanted to point out with the lightsabers, I really want to know what they call them in the movie, but in this case, they're actually metal blades. And what actually activates them is the gauntlets, at least for the red lightsabers. The gauntlets are what heat up the blades, and it's actually more of like a heated blade that can cut through anything rather than like a laser. And that the villains that have the blue ones, they also have similar blades, but apparently theirs work a little bit differently than the heroes is. And one of the special effects directors, I want to say, described it as like Black Widow's baton. So whether or not they're electric based for the villains and fire based for the heroes, we don't know yet, but it's just kind of interesting that it's more heated metal rather than a laser, which I thought was kind of an interesting way to do their own take on the lightsaber.
Yeah, that's super cool. I mean, the more we talk about it, the more I'm like anticipating the movie coming out. So it's always cool to hear how much thought he put into all of the little nuances and details.
And without even touching on the rest of it, like the griffins and all these fantasy characters and creatures in it, it just looks like there's so much to digest here. You may have seen me retweet it on Twitter. The Diamond Select is going to come out with toys that are going to be available at your local comic shop, hopefully available nationwide through big box retail too. And Netflix has also released, they released these Target shirts. And I don't know if they anticipated to release them when they did, or if they sold out. But of course, the fan base went and rated, and online, like we bought up our shirts when we could, and they immediately took them down. And they were like, were they not supposed to go up yet? Because, you know, what they just immediately took them down. And then some of the fans, they're like, I got mine. So they were still sending them out regardless. And they just went back up again a few days ago. So everyone went back in, and I received my 2 shirts today. So Rebel Moon shirts are up at Target. They're up on Amazon already. They're up on TeePublic. And you can also pre-order through Diamond Select. They haven't put up the toys yet, but Diamond put out the notification alert system. So they will let you know when you can start ordering Rebel Moon statues, toys, and merchandise. And Netflix is pouring it all into it. They didn't put this much effort into Army of the Dead, and I understand it because this is a lot more franchisable, if that's a word. It's a lot more general audience friendly for sure. So this one really has a shot to go big. And I'm glad that Zack's getting around to telling the story, because it was almost yet another project that he almost never got made. And now he's probably more popular than he ever was. And he has the luxury of, you know what, I want to do that Rebel Moon story that we never got around to finishing. And it's definitely a passion project for him. And once again, part 1 will release on December 22nd on Netflix. Hopefully details later on a theatrical release. This next bit of news is one that definitely hit me, not as hard as the Kevin Conroy one, but man, it's like, it made me bitter towards Warner Brothers, WB Games, honestly, and I'll tell you why in a second. But Arleen Sorkin, the original voice of Harley Quinn in Batman the Animated Series, has passed away at the age of 67. So she began her career in comedy and as Calliope Jones in Days of Our Lives. Sorkin's portrayal of Harley Quinn was iconic, spanning multiple projects. She received Emmy nominations for her acting, and beyond that, she co-wrote episodes for shows like Tiny Toon Adventures. Her impact was recognized by colleagues like Mark Hamill, and she is survived by her husband, Christopher Lloyd, and 2 children. I don't know if did you play the Arkham games?
Oh yeah, I'm obsessed with those games. I love them. I bought a PS3 to get Arkham City when it came out at my first like big boy job. My 2 cents on this was it was shocking for me because Arleen's voice is like the voice I hear in my head when I read Harley in the comics, and you know, it's the voice I always compare every other Harley Quinn actress to, whether it's live action or animated. And it was odd because I'll talk about this more in the Brocat block, but I've been listening to like a Last Airbender podcast, and they had Andrea Romano on there recently, and she was talking about how sweet Arleen was, and they had worked together before Andrea had done anything with DC Animated on Tiny Toons.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I guess, they went way back, and this was before she passed. This is like a couple months old episode. So it was just kind of eerie that I listened to that. And then I think like 2 or 3 days later, the announcement came out that she had passed away. So it was strange, but obviously an incredibly talented lady, and obviously thought very highly of by all of her peers. So she'll be greatly missed in the community.
And I'll touch a little bit on her origin as far as the character inspiration, because it deeply involves Paul Dini and Bruce Timm. But the reason I brought up the Arkham games is I too bought a PS3 for Arkham. Arkham Asylum was the first one. And I did it because of Batman the Animated Series, honestly. I was like, this is like a revival of that cartoon. They're bringing back Kevin Conroy, Arleen Sorkin, Paul Dini is fucking writing the thing. I'm like, oh my God. I know Batman has a bad history of terrible games when it comes to video games. At that time it did. But I'm like, I don't care. I want to support and basically relive a modern Batman the Animated Series. And it ended up being an incredible fucking game. And throughout the whole thing, like obviously we don't have original Poison Ivy or Riddler, but for the most part, a lot of the voice actors returned for this game. And then when Arkham City came out and was announced, that first trailer comes out, and my wife Kelly, she's like, that's not Arleen Sorkin. And I'm like, yeah, it is. Are you sure? She's like, no, rewind it. And we rewind the trailer, and we're like, that's not fucking Arleen Sorkin. What the hell happened? Was she sick? What happened? And I'm like, Tara Strong, why is she voicing Harley Quinn in Arkham City? Everyone else came back. Why not Arleen? Did she want too much money? That doesn't sound like her. Like, she doesn't often do the voice of Harley Quinn. And it wasn't until a couple years later that they asked her about it. They're like, so did you not want to do Arkham City? And Arlene's like, no, I did. They didn't ask me to come back. And I was like, what the fuck happened? And apparently they thought she sounded too old. And I'm like, she's literally fucking Harley Quinn. Like, I played that game, and I never thought that sounds like an old lady Harley Quinn. I'm like, she fucking nailed it. She sounds like the goddamn character. And I actually think Tara Strong she's not a good Harley Quinn to me, because she is so different to Arleen, who is the fucking standard. And on top of that, I don't know if you remember this, but our Tara Strong years ago posted up an animated series GIF of Harley Quinn, and she was like, good morning, Puddins. And I called her out. I'm like, that's not your fucking Harley. Like, you're not. Like, post up your Arkham City one, or anytime you voiced Harley, but, a lot of people had the misconception that she also voiced Harley Quinn in the animated series, because she kept posting up images of the animated series Harley Quinn and greeting people as Harley on Twitter. So ever since then, I'm like, I don't like Tara Strong. I don't like that she's essentially inadvertently taking credit for Arleen. She's a worse voice actor than Arleen when it comes to Harley Quinn. She's a great Raven and everything, and a Batgirl. But yeah, it just got me real bitter towards Warner Brothers Games for not bringing back Arleen, and for Tara Strong for unfortunately kind of being that way over it. Because she's clearly way more popular than Arleen. Like, why do you need to pretend, like, even bring up the animated series Harley?
Yeah, why take her, like one thing that everyone knows her for, when you have, 1,000 other voice roles that you can do that for, that are your own.
Yeah, and nicely, the Paul Dini, I don't think, has tweeted since her death, and I didn't expect them to, because they were apparently pretty close when it came to the development of the animated series. They used to write in together when it came to Warner Brothers, and I don't know if that meant there was any kind of relationship or romantic relationship or not, but there was definitely a friendship there. And he was inspired by Arlene's appearance in Days of Our Lives. There's a dream sequence where she dresses up as a clown, and he was like, that's perfect. That inspired the character of Harley Quinn for him. He designed it up. He drew it up. Bruce Timm was like, yeah, let me rework this. And he did the better design that is iconic now, that Jester outfit. And they used it, and she was just meant to be a henchwoman to the Joker. And Paul loved the character so much, because he loved Arleen so much, that he kept writing bigger stuff in the show for her. Fans took, not initially like she's as popular today, but fans liked her. And so suddenly she had her own episodes, and it wasn't until about 2007 that she really blew up in popularity, almost to the level of like Deadpool, where years later Deadpool became popular. Same thing with Harley Quinn. And to the point where my wife was such a hipster about it. She's like, you saw the New 52 redesign and all these girls started dressing up as Harley Quinn at conventions. And she's like, I liked Harley Quinn before all these people. And I'm like, yeah, but it happens.
Yeah, I definitely kind of had the same attitude with Harley, but I try and keep the mindset of like, the more people that are into a good character, the better it is for the longevity of that character. But yeah, man, it's been such a rough year for losses of voice actors. And, obviously Kevin Conroy, I don't think anything really compares for people of our generation, especially because he kept coming back to it. But I mean, Arleen is tough, like I said, I think that character would not exist, obviously, without Arleen Sorkin. And I don't think for a lot of people, there is a better version, including, they've done some incredible stuff with her in the comics, but just think about how amazing her performance was that I think originally she was only supposed to be in a couple of episodes. Mm-hmm. And then, like you said, they just kept writing her in because she resonated so much with the fans. And she really was a good foil for the Joker too, where especially once they, introduced her backstory and everything, where it's like, this is the effect Joker has on people. This was a good person that worked on the opposite spectrum of mental health and was corrupted this far. I like you grew up watching Batman the animated series, and it still resonates with me today. And those later seasons, especially where she gets so much of the spotlight, those are some of my favorite episodes.
I do love that you brought up the character arc or the evolution of her throughout the years, especially in recent times. If any broquette goes back to early episodes of this very podcast, because it goes back over 10 years now, so you can almost get a sort of snapshot of her popularity at that time and how she was changing. Kelly and I had the barometer, the measure of Batman the Animated Series as our Harley Quinn, of course, the best thing, our favorite Batman thing ever. And so when we saw that Harley Quinn was starting in the comics and then on, I want to say TV or video games, they were starting to really spin her off as her own. Like, I don't need the Joker, I'm independent. And both Kelly and I had a problem with this because we're like, but in the animated series, she's always the Joker's tool. As soon as, she has episodes where she quote unquote leaves the Joker, but then he snaps his finger or says a nice thing to her, she's immediately back at his side. Like that's what it is. And so that was one of the things that we were like, at that time when she was changing and becoming so independent, we're like, no, that's not Harley. What's going on here?
Yeah, and that was always kind of the tragedy of Harley, right? Yeah. Was like, you wanted to believe that deep down in there was still that psychiatrist that legitimately cared about other people, but then she's so distorted by the Joker. And that was like kind of what made the character so appealing is, on a more micro level, I think a lot of people can identify with that, where it's like, you feel like there is a version of yourself that's been swallowed up by some type of event that you might not even perceive as traumatic, but that has kind of reshaped your personality. So I can definitely understand with people being a little perturbed with her going more of the independent route. I really like her outside of animation or Gotham City Sirens run, but you could argue there's still just a different form of dependence in that. But for me, it's always going to be whenever I pick up a Harley-centered comic, that's always the voice that I hear.
I do remember, even in Gotham City Sirens, when I want to say by like issue 16, the Joker comes back and calls her back, and she's immediately back at Joker's side. And I'm like, yeah, this all checks out. And of course, it's written by Paul Dini. And the girls are like, Harley, come on, what are you doing? He abused you. And she's like, yeah, it's Mr. J. And I'm like, yep, perfect. If this breaks up the Gotham City Sirens, I'm not going to fight it too much. There will never be a better Harley Quinn. Thank you so much, Arleen Sorkin. And that character, of course, was an inspiration and appeared on the big screen. Not something we thought, at least I thought I'd ever see. And that was in David Ayer's theatrical cut of Suicide Squad. And David Ayer recently spoke about how he regrets giving his version of Jared Leto's Joker the damaged forehead tattoo. He initially considered putting blessed on his forehead instead. So on his Twitter, he said, quote, "Original idea was to say blessed and not damaged. Now, having said that, I regret that decision. It created acrimony and division. Not every idea is a good idea, and I'll just be in the corner here while the internet slaps me around for this post, end quote. So this choice caused division among fans, and Ayer is currently trying to build interest to his director's cut of the film, similar to Zack Snyder's Justice League. That first photo was so fucking controversial. You remember how much people were talking about it and speculating on that first image of the tattooed Joker?
Oh, absolutely, I do. I mean, this was like in the heyday of me just consuming like as much film talk as I could. So I was, going on YouTube because YouTube was still a prominent platform at that time, and just like looking at every trailer, every, like discussion about all of the images that had come out. And, love it or hate it, that image of the Joker with the damage tattoo, that got a lot of people talking about that movie that probably at that point didn't even give a shit about the Suicide Squad. So I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I was in my early to mid 20s. Like, I was definitely still in my contrarian phase, to where I was like, this is fucking genius. People are going to watch this just to be pissed off at this point. So it was, if the goal was get people talking one way or another, it definitely worked. And I remember the press for that movie being insane, and it was all centered around how the Joker looked.
Yeah, and it did well financially, as much as people still try to get, Ayer's cut of the film. Like, people forget that I reviewed it positively on here, and I still view the theatrical cut of Suicide Squad positively, and I would like to see Ayer's, of course, one day. But obviously, with the way he's acting around James Gunn, that's not a priority for me right now, as far as like online bugging Warner Brothers about it. But yeah, I mean, it definitely got people talking. You got a lot of theories. Remember when people thought it was Jason Todd?
Yeah, I sure do. That was, I think, the most prevalent theory from the corners of the internet that I was really involved in. And I was going deep down that rabbit hole, man. I was like looking at photos of the Robin costume that's in Ben Affleck's, Batcave next to his face, to seeing if the mask matched up with his eyes. Like, I was looking at, where the tattoo mark was, to see if it lined up with like a crowbar marking. And oh man, I was deep in it.
Yeah, people were lining up the Robin R. They're like, see these ha-ha-has right here? They kind of...
Right. People were speculating, was it like a branding or something? Yeah, I remember that. Man,
that was wild. I remember that was a big thing. And yeah, that was quickly debunked, I think, when... I don't know if it wasn't until years later that Zack said it was Dick Grayson, that there wasn't a Jason Todd in his universe. But I think once Suicide Squad came out, people were like, okay, there's not really anything in here that seems to hint at a twisted or a Jokerized Robin in this universe. And it wasn't until, and I don't know if it would have helped at that time, but David Ayer, I don't know if you know, but he grew up in LA, and he was he didn't have a great childhood and upbringing, and he was very influenced by the Latino community, and he considered himself one of them. Like, he's Caucasian, but he considered himself Mexican because of the people that he surrounded himself with. He did end up in jail a few times, so he knows, the good and bad side of life, whatever that entails. And so at heart, he's constantly, if you look at his Instagram, it's constant like Mexican. He knows the culture so well, like shit that I'm like, oh, this Mexican revolutionary that he just posted about, and he knows Spanish. And so he based the Joker's design on a modern Cholo, a modern, Latin gangster, Mexican in particular, the ones that you might see in jail with the grills and all the tattoos and the hair, all that stuff. So that's what he based that design of. And I don't know if, do you think that would have helped at all at that time if he had revealed that that's the inspiration for this Joker?
I definitely think it would have drawn more attention to it. Even back then, a lot of people wanted a form of representation in movies. And I think that's like a deep cut, for lack of a better term, right? Like saying, this design for this incredibly well-known popular character is based off of Cholo culture, like that, I think would have really gotten the attention of a lot of Latino people for, whether for good or for bad reasons. But, it definitely, I think it shows a certain amount of respect. I was actually about to ask you as you were talking, was it a reference to like Cholo culture? And then I said, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that as a white guy. I had a very close coworker when I worked at the Mo's in Kissimmee that joked around. He's a great dude, this gay guy named Victor that joked around about dressing me up as a cholo. And so I was pretty familiar with it too. And as you started talking, I said, I wonder if that's where he's going with this. I definitely think, I don't know if it would have equated to asses and seats necessarily, more asses and seats. Because like you said, the movie did produce, but I do think it probably would have added to more of the online discussion as far as the fan theories and stuff. And I think, I don't know, maybe it would have helped his cause with getting the director cut too, because it would have maybe had a little more online presence with people being interested in diving deeper down the rabbit hole. But it's hard to say, he's walked both lines of the internet sympathy at this point. So who knows?
Yeah, I just wish he had stood behind this design, but if he legitimately regrets it, then so be it. Zack ended up erasing those tattoos when the Joker appeared in the Snyder cut, and it wasn't even explained in the movie. I'm not too sure what would have happened or how they would have explained it away, but yeah, you don't see any tattoos on that Joker anymore in the Nightmare sequence. And so I don't know. If we get another Jared Leto Joker, it doesn't seem like we'll get that David Ayer design in that future. The Flash ended up underperforming not just in box office, but also in streaming. It's got a slower start compared to Bland Adam with lower viewer numbers. So this reflects challenges faced by the broader DC movie franchise, including well-reviewed movies like Blue Beetle. So the underperformance of streaming releases does raise concerns for the James Gunn future and his planned reboot with Superman Legacy in 2025. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is uncertain now due to the ongoing industry strike. Some people think it's going to get canceled outright. But yeah, it's just not a good sign at all, because this was a movie that James Gunn said, he's like, this is the first movie in my continuity, and I gave notes and changes to the film, and underperformed at the box office. And they were like, oh, it's doing great in home video sales. And it's like, is it though? It's doing great in streaming. Everyone stream it, please. No, it didn't. And now James is like, Blue Beetle is actually the first one in my continuity. And now that one, we're about to talk about that underperformance. So it's just a fucking mess, man. The whole thing. It's not even streaming. People are watching this thing.
I mean, next he's going to say Superman's actually the first one.
For sure.
God damn, dude. We waited so long for the Flash movie just for it to be, a deuce. That's why it's, it's the flush. It's just, I spoke about it last time I was on, but I had a friend that saw it and he wanted to like it really bad. And he's just like, dude, it's just not good. He said it felt very half baked. And it's like, they had almost a decade to get it right, and they still got so much of it so wrong. And, I had, we'll talk about Blue Beetle in a minute, but like, it doesn't look good as far as them trying to quote unquote right the ship. It's to the point now where I don't think they can. Yeah, there's an argument being made that like Superman's such a big character, it's going to be a stretch for it to do less than gangbusters at the box office. I think we're going to see what that looks like, to be honest. Like, it's a double-edged sword for them at this point. Even if they start putting out some more liked movies, because like you said, Blue Beetle's actually getting some positive critic reception. I still don't think it's enough, because their track record is so rough at this point, and now superhero fatigue is in full effect. Mm-hmm. I think probably the way this is going, the more obscure the character is, the better the movie's going to be received, because they have more margin for error as far as, what people want to see out of that character. But then it's like, well, less people are going to show up to see that movie because it's not as well known. So they've really backed themselves into a corner with these properties, I think, which is a shame because, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, even, if you stuck a lot of these characters in a movie, I think people would have shown up. But, it's what happens when you just have poor management.
And the biggest shame is that they have somehow managed after the Flash movie, which has 2 Batman in it, and it's still underperformed like crazy. But money aside, they sabotaged these theatrical versions of these characters. From what I understand, people that saw the movie are like, yeah, the Michael Keaton Batman is ruined by the end of this film. Like, they sabotaged the way that character works. And then Ben Affleck's Batman, ends up being Justice League Batman. He's jokey, he's smiling. His costume looks bright and blue and terrible. He's got like a bat bra thing going on. And it's just like, what the hell is going on here? Yeah. So it's like, all right, well, they've effectively, and Wonder Woman too, I hear she was awful in it. So they're like, all right, well, they've done more terrible on-screen appearances of these characters to the point where the whole branding of even that Ben Affleck's Batman or Michael Keaton's Batman, Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman is effectively ruined in the eyes of anyone that saw all these movies. I don't think that means that if they were to go back and do a Ben Affleck film directed by Ben, that it would do terrible. I don't think it would. I think there's a lot of, you can still dig up that success if you bring back the versions of these characters that people fell in love with. But, that's going to be up to the Warner Brothers Discovery if they want to actually continue with those versions of those characters at any point by selling it to Netflix or by just letting The Flash or Aquaman be the final appearances of some of these characters. And as you were saying, even Blue Beetle. So that opening weekend of 25 million fell short of the lower projected, because they had a higher projection. They lowered it to 30 million. Making it the weakest DC film debut since Wonder Woman 1984. Blue Beetle currently holds a 76% critic score and the 92% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. So there you have it, Warner Brothers. You got your fucking positive reviews that you've been fighting for all these years. But as at least I've been saying for a while now, look at any Rotten Tomatoes review and then look at the box office of it. So often something will have a terrible review and it'll have amazing fucking dollars. BVS is a big example of that. So they continued to chase that tomato and now they have it and they're making less money than ever.
I had a coworker that went and saw Blue Beetle, and I think, not to demean anybody that likes any type of superhero content, but he literally, and he's a comic book fan, and he said, they took everything that was cool and special about Jaime Reyes and kind of shoved it to the side to make it more of a digestible family movie. And I think that is part of the reason why the movie is probably being received so well, because they're now entering the we've gone full Marvel stage. And, we've talked about it. It was a matter of time once they brought Gunn on that was going to happen. What irks me about this so much is for a lot of these more obscure characters that do have, very loyal, hardcore fan bases, if they miss the mark with these characters, it's only one trip around, right? Like, These characters don't print money like Batman, Superman, Spider-Man. If they get a bad film, we're not going to see another one for 20 years. And, or I should say, an underperforming film. And, we've joked around about it. This is why I don't want a James Gunn directed Nightwing, other than the, the moral implications of it. If that thing goes tits up, I don't get to see that character again on screen. I would rather wait and have someone at the helm that knows the character, that understands what they're doing with these characters, and let the film actually draw in enough people that are interested to go watch it, to where it's guaranteed to get, a sequel, to where I don't have to go, is this my once and only shot, only for it to be a disappointing outing to see these characters. And that's what we're running into now. And like I said, we're also now battling superhero fatigue. So Warner Brothers is trying to fight a war on two fronts, and they're losing on both fronts.
And this is what I was also talking to Nick about when he was on a few weeks ago of, this is a character that never sold at AAA levels in the comics. Like, you would expect it to sell at the same level of like a Cyborg or maybe a Hawkman book. But this isn't a title that I ever would like order high on at all. Blue Beetle? No. Hawkman? No. It's a title that it's like, oh, he solicited a new Blue Beetle issue. Okay, that's going to be canceled in less than a year because people don't buy that comic.
And Blue Beetle is a beloved character by a lot of people because he has a good dynamic on the Teen Titans. That's the thing that they don't understand about a lot of these characters. They are loved so much because of the way they interact with other characters in the books that they're known for. It's not this character, has this following, it's guaranteed money. It's absolutely not.
That's the problem. Yeah, you got to put him in or even Young Justice, as Nick was saying. Like you make a Young Justice film and you throw Blue Beetle in there as a supporting character, have at it. Like that's a much better idea than trying to give someone their own solo. Even although if it hadn't been the Snyderverse, because that was originally going to be a Cyborg film, was going to be one of the last movies in his universe before it all rebooted. He had a reboot already worked into his universe, and Cyborg and Green Lantern were some of the last two movies. And it's like, aside from that, because we know Ray Fisher did an incredible job in the Snyder Cut, and I would have liked to have seen more of that. But if I had looked at that slate before that, I would have been like, maybe drop the Cyborg movie because he's on the level of Blue Beetle of like, I like the character, but I can't see him do a whole film on its own. And
he needs team support. That doesn't make it a lesser character. That's a misconception a lot of people have. It means that he has a good dynamic that makes it interesting when he interacts with other heroes.
And that's the way it's going to go with Blue Beetle. I think I had said last week that I asked my dad, who was born in Mexico, of like, have you heard of Blue Beetle? And he's like, no. I'm like, have you seen, because he watches a lot of Telemundo, Univision. Have you seen any Blue Beetle? And he's like, no, what is that? And I'm like, okay, like that answers it. Like the Mexican community is not even behind this movie. And I went.
Sorry, to touch on that, I watched Cobra Kai, so I'm a fan of the actor that portrayed Jaime. And I remember being like, I feel bad for this kid because I'm sure they're giving him a lot of empty promises up front. This movie is not going to perform well. And this is probably going to be like, it's going to be like a Daniel Radcliffe situation where now he's just going to get casted because of Cobra Kai because he has this one forgettable movie outing.
Yeah. Well, I was in Mexico City. I saw one ad for Blue Beetle, and I'm like, they shouldn't even put that up because it's going to be a waste of money. The people here they're not going to go see it. I saw it on Twitter where the community was like, it's because it feels like it's a movie made by, someone said, fourth generation Mexican Americans, where it's like they're so far removed from the culture that it's not even, they don't feel represented in the movie.
Yeah, it's not relevant to the people that they think they're appealing to.
Yep. But there you have it. I'm sure it'll be on Max very, very soon if you so wish to see it. So before we go into the Brocat block, we have a comment from Adrian from Patreon. And he said, quote, this was referencing the Blue Beetle flop episode, actually. He said, quote, good episode, guys. Sorry I haven't posted a comment lately. Regarding Blue Beetle, he's a cool character. Like Nick said, he was awesome in season 2 of Young Justice. I liked him in Justice League vs. Teen Titans Animated. But he's not my favorite like Martian Manhunter or Superman. The whole hashtag representation matters never resonated with me. It feels like a marketing ploy to get people to watch a film. Promote the story, not just the one specific characteristic. I'm African American and I still haven't watched Black Panther because I am not interested in anything the MCU puts out. I like characters I can identify with, not solely based on race, like Martian Manhunter who's an outsider looking in. Or Billy Cranston, the OG Blue Power Ranger, who went from being picked on to being a badass. Side note, I am not a badass, but I wish I were. Or Castile from Supernatural, who's an outsider who puts up with humanity and their BS every day. To answer Nick's question, a celebrity I would like to hang out with is Misha Collins, who played Castile on Supernatural. I want to ask him questions like why he wasn't offered a spinoff way back in the day, and why the production budget for Wardrobe sucked. I think I also want to hang out with Justin Nemo, who played Zane the Silver Power Ranger from Power Rangers in Space. He seems like a cool guy. P.S. Sorry for the long comment. End quote. Not a problem, Adrian. I will turn that over to you, Sam. Is there an actor, celebrity, that you would want to hang out with for a day?
Yeah, David Tennant.
Oh, that's a good pick.
Yeah, I actually just recently started watching Doctor Who, but I used to I still am really into like detective series, and I remember seeing him in Broadchurch, which was then later imported to the States as Grace Point. And he plays, oddly enough, the same character in both because he's such a good actor and does a really good American accent. So yeah, he'd definitely be my top pick. He's just such a multifaceted guy, and I follow him on social media. He seems very down to earth, and he just seems like a cool guy to, hang out with, go to a comic book store, have a beer with.
David Tennant. Yeah, I like that pick. I remember working at the comic shop when they were switching him over to Matt Smith, and people were pissed, man. They grew to like.
I mean, what does
Matt
it tell you?
Smith,
They're
but-
bringing him back as that same character again.
Oh,
so,
no shit.
Yeah.
Is it like a
Yeah.
multiverse thing, or?
I'm not sure of all the details, but my dad's really into Doctor Who, and I sent him the article. And yeah, apparently he's the first Doctor. He will have been both the 10th and the, I believe, 14th Doctor. So
Wow, that's fucking
Yeah.
insane. I like him
Yeah.
in Jennifer Jones as the villain, the Purple Man.
Oh, me too. Yeah, the Purple Man. God, he was terrifying in that show.
And as I was watching it, I'm like, there's like some heavy dark implications on his powers, and I'm almost like, I don't know if you can pull that villain off in 2023. Like, that wasn't that long ago, but I'm still like, on that watch. And that was back when it was Netflix's Marvel shows, right? This is when Disney had like very little to do with them, and I think that's why they were able to do some of that stuff.
It's funny that you said that too, because my other pick was Kristen Ritter. I was like, oh, I guess it's funny that we talk about Jessica Jones, because yeah, that was my backup.
Well, thank you once again, Adrian, for your Patreon comment. You too can support the show by heading on over to patreon.com/thereasonsimBroke. Currently publishing at a loss every week, but that little bit, the $2 help in bringing that loss down, it goes a long way in helping. But thank you once again for the comment, Adrian. Let's head into the final portion of today's show, the Brokehead Block, what Sam and I have been up to since you last heard us. So Sam, what have you been up to since you were last on? What have you been watching, reading, or playing? Or what's been making you broke?
All right. So as I just said, I did recently delve into Doctor Who. I'm going to upset a lot of the purists, but one of my coworkers is super into it. So I asked him, where do you start? And he goes, well, the current era starts with the 9th Doctor, but if there's a Doctor that you like the actor for, just start with that one. So I watched a few episodes of the 9th Doctor, and I was like, this is fucking insufferable. So I just went straight to David Tennant. Other than that, I've been working a lot of conventions for work. I'm going to try and post it within the next couple days. I was working Gen Con in Indianapolis, and it was just one of the most incredible displays I've seen for an artist alley, which for people that don't do the con life, Artist Alley at any given show is just this big area they set aside for artists to sell original artwork as well as like any major franchise stuff that they've worked on. And then usually they'll do signings throughout the event. And then sometimes you can do meet and greets and Q&As and stuff. It's really cool if you are like me or Daniel, where you get really into specific artists and want a lot of stuff from them. But I looked up the artist roster beforehand. It was massive. I wanted to kind of spread my money out, buy a bunch of different stuff that I liked. Ended up buying a ton of stuff from the same artist. This guy, Bryce Coe, I got to meet him. Super cool. I bought this Psyduck print.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's a bunch of different Psyducks at like a farmer's market. And his assistant brought out like a Wheel of Fortune wheel for me to spin, and depending on what you hit, you got a different hidden Psyduck because he had drawn up different versions, and I got the shiny one, so that was very exciting.
Man.
But he was a super cool guy. I also bought some stickers from him, these Team Rocket stickers with like Team Rocket members with different Pokemon. I'm going to post it all in the Brokehead Core Discord later, but and then I also bought a Persona 5 print from him. Super nice guy. Check him out. I want to say all his handles is like Bryce Coe Draws, but you can just type in Bryce KHO and find all this stuff. Really cool. He does a lot of limited run stuff, a lot of anime and video game artwork, as well as just original stuff. And he also did the box art for the upcoming game, Sea of Stars, if anyone has seen that. Other than that, I have been reading the Avatar: The Last Airbender comics because I've been going on a Last Airbender kick. Super cool. The sequel comics are really good about like filling in a lot of the questions that fans of the original series had after it ended.
Zuko's mom.
Yes. So that's what I was going to say. The big one that people want to know about is Zuko's mom. They just released the omnibus version of the story that came out which is called The Search. It's really good. It's definitely worth checking out. Really cool art style. You could definitely tell they were probably inspired by Dustin Nguyen. Very similar to that, but a little more fitting of that show, a little more anime-esque. Which brings me to the last thing that made me broke. I have a buddy at work. We've been friends for a while. Just kind of hit it off like you and I did, Daniel. And he's really into independent comics. And so I've been sharing some recs with him. And then he goes, "Hey, have you read Ascender and Descender?" And I go, "No, I've been meaning to check those out for a while." And he had the single issues of all of Ascender and the collected edition of Descender. So I borrowed them from him. I haven't started yet, but I'm super excited to. And then once I finish, I'm gonna buy my own copies because Dustin has the deluxe edition on his sites, and I always want to support that guy, and then hopefully get them signed by him eventually. So that's most of what's been making me broke is a lot of original art, which is my new thing. And whenever I go to a con, I try and buy prints or something from an artist I like, and then reading Avatar comics. I've also been buying up some Power Rangers stuff. I just haven't gotten the chance to read it yet.
Did you end up sending any stuff for the Dustin Nguyen CGC signing or commission?
No, man, it completely passed me by. I think I had just gotten back from Indy, and then I immediately had to go work a Yu-Gi-Oh tournament. So
of all things.
Yeah, it was rough, man. Jimmy was out, so I had to go up to bat for him that week, so I missed it.
Gotcha. Yeah. Did I tell you what I'm getting commissioned yet? I don't know if we have talked about it before. So Kelly and I each sent the book because that's her favorite artist as well. And she thought about it for a while because I'm like, I'm ready with mine. Like I'm going to get because we have a Harley Quinn already from him. So I sent in, I think I want to say a Batman blank, and I'm having Ra's al Ghul thrown on there. And she goes, okay. So she finally thinks it up, and she's like, I want Damian Wayne.
Oh,
Robin.
That's incredible.
And I'm like, oh, another Al Ghul. Perfect. So I was like, all we need is a Talia, and we'll have the Al Ghul family together. And she's like, no, fuck Talia. And she's very against the Batman Talia relationship. And I'm like, but look, they made the best Robin ever together.
That's such a good call for her too, because Dustin draws Damian in a way like nobody else does.
Yes.
It's like my favorite interpretation of him.
The wispy hair and all that. Like you can tell it's Damian.
Yeah, exactly. And he, without even having to like put any words on the page, he just exudes that like superior, like dickhead vibe.
Yeah. And I really like the way he does Ra's al Ghul with the squinty eyes. Like it's a very unique race as well. So I'm like, I got to get it. One, my favorite fucking Batman villain. He's got to do it. And I don't know if he's going to do it in that.
It's perfect for your collection.
Right. And he's done them before in the Paul Dini run. So I'm curious if he's going to do the Lil Gotham version or if he's going to do like the more traditional comic version, but just leaving it up to him, however it comes back, I'll be happy either way.
Yeah, for sure. What about you? What's been making you broke?
Well, I picked up my comics yesterday, and it wasn't a crazy pile. I think it ended up being 8 books total, but I read the second to last issue of Batman the Animated Series Continues Season 3, written by Paul Dini, drawn by Ty Templeton. And this last arc involves Ra's al Ghul. And I'm like, oh my God, it's like Paul Dini wrote this just for me. And it's to the point where Ra's has, we've seen this before, where he's overused the Lazarus Pit and it no longer works for him. So he's talking to Bruce and he's like, look, I want to leave you my legacy. I want you to have the League of Assassins. I want you and Talia to run this. And we've even bioengineered because I want a world for I want a future that Talia can live in, that you and Talia can, and I can't bring back your parents, but I can solve that legacy for you. And he essentially bioengineered wheat that can grow in any part of the world, regardless of the conditions, regardless of the amount of water available. And this wheat can then be churned into a variety of different foods, including protein-based ones. And so Rachel's like, this is my gift to you. Take a sample, test it, do whatever you want to do. It's not a fucking trick. I'm dying, so I want to leave this for you. And I'm like, come on, Batman, just fucking take him up on it. Let's have this happy fucking ending. And Batman, of course, tests it and it all checks out. And then he takes it to Poison Ivy, and Poison Ivy's like, yeah, it's all fine, except it resists me when I try to control it. Like, that's the only thing. And I'm like, no, let's not do anything bad here, Paul. Just have it be a happy ending where Batman and Talia live together forever in the world of the animated series. The end.
I'm not sure if you're going to get that.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But this is also, and this is the first time Catwoman and Talia meet. And that's the way Paul Dini wrote it. And I'm like, that's fucking true. They were never in an episode together. Ever. Like, not even in Batman Beyond when they brought back Talia. So I was like, all right. And so Paul Dini wrote the first meeting between Catwoman and Talia, and they're cordial to each other because I'm assuming neither knows that they're both sleeping with the same guy.
Yeah.
So,
and, oh, no, sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it. Like, I rubbed that in on Kelly's face too, because I'm like, in this comic, Catwoman forces a kiss onto Bruce when she sees him. But in the last issue, Batman and Talia slept together. Like, and I'm like, this is Batman the Animated Series, my Batman, so far, prefers Talia. Like, that's his beloved. Like, let's ignore the Mask of the Phantasm, because there's a good argument there for Andrew Belmont. But right now, in this current iteration, in this current series, Talia's winning.
Yeah, and what I was going to ask you, it's been a long time since I've read it. Didn't Dini also co-write Resurrection of Ra's al Ghul?
He sure did. That's a great one. I love that series.
That's one of my favorite books of all time, man. What a fucking banger of a job he did. That's what I was going to say. I think he might be the best race writer as far as just understanding the complexity of that character.
Yeah, obviously Denny O'Neil was incredible as well, but man, Paul Dini, I don't know why I want Paul to be back on Detective Comics. I remember that incredible run he did, like him and Dustin Nguyen. Like, damn.
God, one of my favorite of all time. And then they also do Streets of Gotham together?
Yeah, and then The Heart of Hush.
Yeah, God, all of that whole era, that like 07 to 09 era of Detective and all of the spin-off comics, where it was literally Paul Dini, Dustin Nguyen, and like Patrick Gleason.
Yes.
Fucking glorious, dude. Like, the best era of the type of Batman story that I love, right? Where it's like a mix of the more bombastic villains and then the like hard-boiled street crime. They do that stuff so well.
Yeah, man, it's such a good era, and I'm getting some of it now with that animated series. It's without Dustin, but Ty Templeton's an incredible artist too. I've gotten a commission from him. I shared that one recently where it's Raish and Batman sword fighting shirtless, like in that one episode.
God, it's so good.
So it's like, yeah, man, I can't wait to get that piece back. And to finish off this, I'm debating whether I want to read that last issue because I know things are going to tumble for him, but I got to read it, man. I got to see what Paul puts together.
Just get it slabbed and never read it. And then it's just your head canon. That's the actual canon.
Well, Sam, thank you so much for being on this week and for helping with the variety of topics. And you'll have to let me know what you thought of the Rebel Moon trailer. And please let the Brocat Corps know where they can find you if you do still mess around with any social media.
Yeah, I have been taking a break from social media, but if you send me a message on there, I will get back to you ASAP. So Instagram at Samuel Boylston, Twitter, which is now X, Samuel Boylston, and yeah, good Lord. And then best place to find me usually, especially if you want to talk comic stuff, is on the Brocat Corps Discord, which you guys should join up anyway if you're a fan of the show, because we're all pretty active on there, and just it's a good place to meet like-minded people. Very good. And there will be links to everywhere you can find Sam on the description of today's episode as well.
In case you're driving, need to come on back, just swipe on over to the description and you will find all the links there. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us this week. I've been Daniel, joined by Sam, and Brocat Core, all will be well. So I've got a little post-jingle question to ask you, Sam. Putting you on the spotlight a little bit, so I'll kind of answer it first to give you some time. But what is your favorite Harley Quinn-centric episode from Batman the Animated Series? While you think on that one, I will say for me, it's between Mad Love and Harley's Holiday. But right now, I'm going to go with Harley's Holiday, just because like that was the one chance at getting a quote-unquote normal life where she was slapped with the sane stamp on her degree. And then she goes out to try to buy that dress, and she thinks they're accusing her of stealing it. And then she ends up reverting back because of a misunderstanding. And then Batman buys her that dress at the end in Arkham Asylum and brings it to her and says, I had a bad day once. It's just so fucking heartfelt, and that's my pick. What about you, Sam?
So I'm going to say Mad Love, but it's funny that you picked Harley's Holiday because I had a book version of that as a kid that my mom bought me, I think from Publix. And it had, I'm sure you remember this era of kids' books. It was hardback, and it had one of those bars on the side where you could press the buttons and it would play sound effects.
Yes.
And my mom would read that book to me constantly. So like you would press a button and it made the hyena noises, because if you remember in the beginning, she's like walking into the department store to buy the dress with the hyenas. And then there was like another one of like a police siren. So I also have a ton of love for Harley's Holiday. Like you said, man, what a good episode. Like, I think it really just nails the tragedy of that character, of even when she tries to do the right thing, that kind of like a perceived jokerism is just always around her. Like it's an aura that she can't get rid of.
And I'm glad that you brought up Mad Love as your pick, because it was, I'm remembering back now. It was a one shot that released first, and then they adapted it into the episode for season 4. So it was one of those instances where it was a comic first and then made its way over. And there are some differences. The comic is a little more bloody. It's a little more scandalous with the sex symbolism in there. Like, don't you want to ride your Harley? It's a little more blatant in the comic.
Overt, yeah.
But
and that's one thing I always liked about D&E and Bruce Timm is, I think they really knew that their audience was multifaceted, right? Like they knew kids were watching it, but they also knew adults were watching it. And a lot of people were watching it with their kids. So when they went out into other mediums, they were like, we know like older people are interested in this too. So they would throw in stuff like that.
And I also like that it showed the danger of the Joker, where it's like in a matter of a scene, from one scene to the next, you see the complete reversal of a psychologist to patient, and he's suddenly with the one with the notebook.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite, like, I wouldn't call it a gag, but like callbacks in the show.
And it just shows how crazy dangerous the Joker is in manipulating Harleen into thinking that Batman is the evil one, the one that beats him up and brings him in. And she refuses to see that the Joker is the monster in all of this, because she's falling head over heels with the guy.
Yeah, it's incredible. And, like we said earlier in the issue, just brought to life in a way I don't think anyone else could have other than Arleen Sorkin. And I love the Gotham City Siren stuff too, which is also, a lot of it was written by D&E, especially the earlier stuff. It definitely, you feel the effects of the Joker in that too, because it's like, she goes from being dependent on the Joker to, like you said, when he comes back, she goes right back to him. But even before that, she's kind of just swapped her dependence on Joker to a dependence on Poison Ivy.
Right. And she still brings up the Joker, even though, like, around them, like, you're just going to go right back to him. And she's like, no, I'm not. And sure enough.
Yeah, that ex that she can't get over, where it's kind of like, she definitely loves Ivy in a way, but like, you always get that sense of like, is this permanent, or is this just kind of a holdover?
That's right. Yep. Another gift from Paul Dini and Arleen.